Well, if you watched the previous video, I told you to watch the next video, and this is the next video. I'm recording it about 5 seconds after the last video, and it's about this next video, which I told you of in the last video. Okay, so here goes nothing. I guess I was going to talk about the golden age of video gaming. Yeah, that beautiful time where all video games were good. Now, earlier on this year, I've had a cough for too long now. I just can't shake the bum. Earlier on this summer, I was studying something called the ultimate form of storytelling. The Ultimate Form of Storytelling by Gregg Everman of UNIM Radio 1171. Cool Radio, also known as Universe Immersion Radio, and UNIM is just a short version of that. An abbreviated version. Earlier on this year, I spoke to you of the ultimate form of... I didn't speak to you, I'm sorry. Just getting a little confused there, maybe because the music isn't working for me. Okay, me too. I'm gonna play the Halo Wars... No, the Halo Spartan Strike soundtrack, because, oh shoot. Oh wait, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so, because it's really cool. Honestly, the soundtrack is way better than the game. But otherwise, so, earlier on, I was, considering the ultimate form of storytelling. I realized that there is no ultimate form of storytelling out there. You look at books, they're very, very flawed. They don't have, like, obviously they're just on a piece of paper. You're just reading a piece of paper with some black ink on it. You know, maybe a few pictures here and there to help out, but, you know, that's the best a book can do. A magazine is very good. A magazine, you see very colored pictures, but the stories always have to follow that magazine style where, like, things happen so fast you barely keep up. And the problem with that too is there's no music score. There's no they're very good though. Actually, they'd be close. Yeah, and then everything happens too fast. It has to happen in too much of a comic book style. You know, everything is over exaggerated and all that. Then we'll go into movies. Movies are like just really bad. You know, they've always got to be these set amounts of time. They're always just very poorly put together, and they make like one out of every 30 movies is good. That just goes to show how bad movies are. And I know there's different genres, and sometimes they're not all bad. You know, every movie has redeeming qualities, but the majority of them are not really that well put together. So then we'll look at the final one I'll talk about here: video games. Video games are probably the worst, although believe it or not, they actually have the chance to be the best. Video games right now are just about action, and it's really bad stuff. Okay, I watched a video yesterday on TED Talks. TED Talks. Wow, those guys are weird. But this video did speak of how they improve humanity's reactions to stuff. I just called us humanities there. And but they did show how they did demonstrate how we react much better after we've been playing video games, because I guess they focus your reactions and all that. Is this video really only 4 minutes in? Feels like I've been talking. Well, I mean, I was just doing another video, so maybe that's where the extent of time comes from. Anyways, but right now video games are at an all-time low. They focus on so little that it's just ridiculous. You see one or two good ones out of, 90, 100 bad games. No one's willing to try anything anymore. The entire market has shut down to the point where experimenting is no longer an option, and most video game companies are content with just giving you the bare minimum. I call it the least common denominator, and that's all they'll ever give you. They don't want you to experience anything higher. They don't want you to feel like you're part of something bigger, or like feel like you're part of a new story, because that would be risky, right? That could get them in trouble. They could suddenly, what if the game bombed and they'd spent 200 million on it? No one wants to be in that case. Because with video games, they even have to keep it running for a while and all that too, eh? Unlike movies, where like they've got all these updates and these patches and all that nonsense. But anyways, games nowadays just settle for least common denominator. Anything EA puts out, least common denominator. Anything Activision puts out, least common denominator. Anything Microsoft Studios puts out is the least common denominator. That's just how it goes in video games. But there was this magical time long ago in a land filled with fairies and dragons and princesses and warlocks. The year was called 2004 to 2008, and during this time, there were these magical creatures called good video games. And during this magical time, full of pixie dust, we actually had good games. Pretty much anytime you went into any store at all, I would always go to Future Shop, which is the Canadian equivalent of Best Buy. Future Shop went under, though. They are Best Buy now. During this magical time, Best Buy they actually had a lot of good games on the shelf. And I'm talking about all range of games. You know, shooters were good. Adventure games were good. Sport games were good. Racing games were good. Any genre you can think of, they were all good. Isn't that so weird when all games are bad now? You know, you were picking. I always say to my colleagues, not to be confused with my brothers and sisters, I always say to them how, my colleagues, how, something? What was I talking about? I was talking about something about Golden Age and video games, and yeah, I'm always saying to my brothers and sisters how back in the day, you would often call a game bad just because it wasn't as good as all the other Golden Age games, right? You would often call just a game that didn't have as much as some of the others, you would just call it bad because it wasn't that good. Like first, the game Cameo actually was pronounced. In the game Cameo, you were playing as this fairy who can turn into animals and stuff like that. And the game was pretty bland. No one really cared for it much. But now when you look back on it, you think, man, that actually wasn't too bad. And then there's another game called Time Shift. If you remember that game, you win a cookie. Time Shift, from your mother, not me. Grow up. Okay, Time Shift was one of these games that no one really cared about because it was just so... there was nothing to it, right? But in this game, Time Shift, it was actually a darn good game. You know, just maybe not as much as in depth as a lot of the games were back then. But it was still really good. While the wind is just bucketing against the dream machine that I'm in. Stuff of dreams. Stuff of legends. But otherwise, the game was actually very good, all things considered. But it just couldn't compete with other Golden Age games because they were all so good back then. So from the year 2004 to 2008, not so much 2004, although Halo 2 did come out in 2004. And then not right, like maybe not all the games in 2008. But almost every game made throughout this period was very good. And this is why a lot of people started getting out of the theaters. And just coming to play video games. There was really no reason to watch movies anymore. Movies were not that good during this time, and video games were at an all-time high. Every game was good to the point where it was just phenomenal. But my theory on what's happened, and I've watched a lot of content related to this, so I'll throw the theory out there, and you can judge for yourself whether it's credible or not. Although you better believe it. My theory is that, wow, I just completely lost my train of thought. Let me think here. What was my theory? Something about a theory, right? Yeah, I think there's something about a theory. But anyway, so my theory was that, the reason why video games became so bad was because a lot of the companies, the big companies who are making them, the EAs, the Activisions, the Microsofts, the Bungies, we all know who Bungie are, right? They decided to, you might always say, collaborate together in maybe not so openly as that, but we'll call it collaborating together for now, where um, they decided that everyone was breaking their back. Just quick check for spies. There we go. Spies are people who look into the universe immersion mobile and watch me as I turn red in the face through embarrassment. It's not a good thing, listeners, for someone who is I better start whispering because those spies, you know what I mean, when they get to calling you names and saying how silly you are, it's like bullets, you know, it hurts like bullets. But anyways, back to the program. When these companies started collaborating together, they just kind of decided generally that everyone was breaking their backs to create the perfect video game and compete with other people who were also creating the perfect video game, and it was just getting too hard, right? No one could do it anymore. Everyone was killing themselves to come up with a perfect piece of entertainment, and then it would bomb? What? We can't bomb. We spent years on that thing. And like more passion than Chef Ramsay could want. Chef Gordon Ramsay. So they say to themselves, what are we still doing? Why are we killing ourselves to make all this perfect stuff that all of the designers just love it, and everyone's trying really, really hard to be the best new game out there? Why are we killing ourselves for this when we could just settle for the least common denominator? Why couldn't we all just admit that we make more money as a whole when we just work, when we just make something simple, right? Just a gameplay. No storylines, no innovation, no new gameplays. Just make the old-fashioned gameplays and come up with this brand new scheme of stuff like 4K. Everyone loves that word 4K. It means high definition and garbage games. Because 4K is so expensive and hard to make that the companies can no longer afford to bomb, and they have to make them all their productions the same. Also, when using 4K, it greatly limits and restricts the gaming engines. The gaming engine can no longer be as in-depth and innovative because of glitches and crashes of the server and all that nonsense. So what they decided to do is, we'll just come up with this thing called 4K, and we'll all have to make these really, really cheap, cheesy games with $200 million budget in each of them. And that should work good. Also, they muscled the little guys out by either buying them out or just by making all this 4K thing such a big thing that if you didn't have 4K and you were just one of those small little games with where you can practically see the megapixels coming through, suddenly you couldn't really compete anymore because the 4K games looked so much more visually stunning than your game, even though your game was probably 10 times funner. So all the little fish went out around the year 2009, 2010, and onward. Also, another driving force to destroy good video games was the 2010 era of zombie games. Zombie games. The greatest scourge of video gaming is zombie games, where gamers spend hours and hours and hours on end walking through a land infested with the most unrealistic plots for zombie infections, and they use a hatchet to cut their way through a trillion different zombies. Oh, and every now and then they give you a few new tools or a few objectives like, will you be the last one to survive the zombie horde when all those guys comes to get yous? And just so absurd and just brainless. I've seen one or two okay productions coming out of the zombie craze. And when I say okay, it doesn't mean I would watch them. I mean, I think zombies are despicable. Really despicable. I mean, literally despicable. To the point where they sully your humanity. But that being said, I have to admit, they sure did all right, a couple of them, but the majority of zombie productions were just really, really bad. Anyways, I should probably return to the original point here before I bore you stiff. Yeah, so during this 2009 to 2000 current day era, um, games started accepting much lower standards for their games. Storylines were no longer very complex anymore in 2009, and usually just bad. One could say, oh well, they missed a few shots. Well, okay, but by the time we hit 2010, we should be back on it, right? Okay, we say we missed 20 games, 20 straight games, all happen to have bad stories. From Tomb Raider Underworld to Halo 3 ODST, and then Modern Warfare 3 and Gears of War 3 came out in 2010, I think it was. And then there were other, there's plenty of others. I'm sure other people have a long list of them, Madden NFL 2009 and PGA 09 and all that. All these games were just so, Tiger Woods 09, I think it was called. By the way, all these games were just so much worse than 2007 and prior games had been, that it just kind of got ridiculous. It's like, well, what happened to all the good games? And during this point, a lot of people stayed with the gaming industry because they were just waiting for good games. But in the meantime, during the golden age, we kind of been taught, the golden age of video game, we kind of been taught to just drop a game when you're done playing it, right? Because there's so many other good games out there that why keep struggling after that one game when there's like why keep playing the one game, which is really fun, when there's so many other fun games out there. But during this time, we've been taught to just continue cycling them out, because even though they were all really good, they were that was just how it worked back then. You just cycle a game out when you're done. Even like a great game like Halo 3, you might just play it twice, play a bit of the multiplayer, and then that was it, right? Cycle it out, because there's a lot of other good games coming out. But unfortunately, after 2008, there weren't any more good games coming out. As the sequel craze began, where everyone was making sequels to Golden Age games, everyone noticed that the sequels just were really, really bad. They were just bad. Every one of them was bad. Final Fantasy 13 2, bad. Final Fantasy 14, bad. Soul Calibur 5, bad. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, bad. Gears of War 3, multiplayer was pretty fun, but it was pretty bad. The storyline wasn't that good, although they were trying, so I'm not going to roast them. And then, most of the games that came out were really, really bad. I guess by the time we hit 2012, we were starting to get a couple good games going. Like Halo 4 had its moments. I'm going to go into a ton of reviews on Halo 4 shortly, by the way. I love it and hate it at the same time, so we'll see what that's all about soon, listeners. And then, what other games? Oh yeah, and Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. I actually never played it, but I hear it was really, really good. Everyone loved it. But either way, I won't go too long into that. In the meantime, it's 12:35. I'm running out of time. We're doing a scheduled shutdown at 12:45, and the power turns off. It could be the zombie apocalypse, even. The producer never said it wasn't. But yeah, during this era, 2010, 2009 onward to modern day, especially before 2012, games were just so bad and so poor quality that I think a lot of people were starting to despair that there was ever going to be a good game again. And during 2012 and maybe like a little bit into 2013, 2014, 2015, it's like kind of like remnants of good games. No game was actually good, although Final Fantasy 15 is actually good. Okay, we could go forever into the mistakes 15 made, especially during the storyline and all that. I get that, but let's face it, the game was pretty good. Excuse me. Okay, but yeah, the game was pretty good. It's one of the only good games post the Golden Age. After the year 2008, very few good games have come out. Like I said, there's a lot of reasons for it. According to my research, it's been a lot of people who like I said, the game companies all joined together and they bought out the little fish and they pooled everyone together into these barrels where you had to work for Microsoft, you had to work for Sony, you had to work for EA, and if you weren't working for these people, you couldn't make a expensive game. Your game would just be this little cheap thing. And unfortunately, when your game's just this little cheap thing, then you got to put it on an independent platform. I've heard of games called indie games. I actually know almost nothing about indie games, which is weird because I should know a lot about indie games. But indie games are pretty cool because they're independent games, you know, not loyal to Microsoft, not loyal to Activision, EA, Sony, nobody. And which is pretty cool, and that's where good games used to come from. You know, you look at Gears of War 1, they made that game for just like $6 million. It wasn't much at all. And then they made that game Section 8, if any of you have ever played that. That game couldn't have spent more than $1 million. I mean, they were spending nothing on these games. And they were still really good. Even Halo 3, they only spent $30 million on. I think, yeah, I think it was. And it was really, I mean, it might have been, I deem it to be the best game ever. I'm not really sure. There could be a competitor out there, but I think it was the best game ever. And it had its problems, which I might go into on a later video. But in the meantime, so to get back to the original topic and stop distracting myself. During the Golden Age, we saw a lot of good games, and then during the post-Golden Age, we saw almost none. Like, where did all the good games go? Why did they die so suddenly? They died so suddenly that people believed that there was never any good old Golden Age. A lot of people started believing that. But when you go back to the games in 2007, which I've been doing a lot of lately, and 2008, 2006, and 2005, all those years, when you go back to that age, hang on, listeners, we got a problem. Spies on approach. Watch out. Keep your eyes on them spies. Eyes on the skies, eyes on the spies. But either way, so during that age, a lot of stuff was happening. Yeah. So, but if you go back to those years of 2004 to 2008, you'll realize that if you play any one of those games, you're just having so much more fun than if you're playing modern day games. You're going, why? Like, I mean, maybe there was a golden age, and it is true. Unfortunately, as much as I regret it, because I would be tickled pink and purple if modern day developers could make good games. I would be right back into video gaming. I'm 25 years old, but I would still be right back into video gaming. I mean, I guess 25 years old. Everyone plays video games at 25 nowadays. But yeah, I'd be right back into video gaming if it was still good. But it's not. It's garbage. Video gaming is terrible right now. I mean, I saw a commercial for this new video game called Hunt. Oh, it's like this stupid cowboy game where you're roaming throughout the woods, and like I don't even know what you do. You're just going around like killing monsters and stuff. And like that's all they brag about in the commercials. That's all they brag about is this stupidity. Running around, killing stuff. You gotta be kidding. Like, what else is there? You have to talk about storyline. You have to talk about characters. You can't talk about running around killing a bunch of things. That's like the stupidest thing ever. What happened to stories in video gaming? Where did it go? I'll tell you where it went. It went with this unified development, these people trying to just choose the least common denominator to make maximum amount of money and other things, I'm sure, which I might go into at a later date. And they didn't give a darn about the gamer. They just wanted the gamer to buy their product, and that's all you were good for them. You know, you meant nothing to them. And plus, they pooled their money into these $200 million projects, and then no longer is there 60, 70, 80 games on the shelf all the time. Now there's just a few games on the shelf, right? But each one of them spent $200 million. So instead of making 10 games for $200 million, now you can only make one game for $200 million. And it's just garbage. It's a garbage game. But in the meantime, it was $200 million. So are you going to buy it or what? And it's going to be on the shelves of Best Buy for the next 10 years. So get used to it. Maybe just buy it. And because it's all the rage, even though it's not, no one gives a darn about it. They just have to talk about it because there's nothing else to talk about. Why don't we talk about Golden Age games, huh? Why don't we go back and play Golden Age games? Play their multiplayers. I think the servers are still up on half of them. Why don't we go back and do that? Because these new modern day games are so bad. I mean, okay, I can't even think of any good ones. Like, I mean, they went on like these remake crazes. Um, and even then, they would just do worse. For instance, okay, I don't know. Does anyone remember the Halo 1 Combat Evolved Anniversary remake? That remake that just made you cry. It was so much worse than the original. And then in the Halo 2 Anniversary remake, actually there they did a really, 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 really good job. Yeah, I mean, wow, unbelievable. Same guys too. Saber Interactive, I think the company is called. They made both. How's that even like? How do you? I don't know. But yeah. To get back to the original topic, um, during those years you saw a lot of anniversaries and stuff, and then the age of sequels died out when originally they were all sequels to Golden Age games, and so they would sell and then they'd be bad, and then they try to make a sequel to that game, and that game, because it was so bad, no one buy the sequel, so the age of sequels died out. They tried anniversaries for a bit. They worked a little bit during the 2012 to say 2015 era, and then they died out too. In the meantime, and during this whole total of time, I bought a grand total of like 4 games, 5 games maybe. Whereas during the golden age, my brother, who was buying the games at the time because I was just a little bitty fellow, he bought like 60 games. 60 games. It was something like that. Anyway, way more. So 60 games from the year 2007 to 2008, because we got the console in 2007. So we'll even be generous. From 2007 to 2010, so 3 years, we bought a grand total of 60 games. From 2010 to it's almost 2019, we bought a grand total of like 6 games. Wow, congratulations. I can name them. Halo 4, Halo 5, Halo Master Chief Collection. We bought all 3 of those. Halo 5. Halo 5 is so bad. And then we bought Final Fantasy 15. We bought Crisis 3. I liked some parts of it, although the swearing got me. And then we bought 1 or 2 other games, I think. A couple PlayStation Vita games, as garbage as that console was, and a few other games. So I don't know, maybe 10 games total, something like that. Maybe even a couple more. But nothing compared to the total of what we were buying during the Golden Age. The Golden Age, we were buying everything. If it was on the shelves, pretty much buy it. Sports games, racing games, shooter games, adventure games, action games, and it didn't matter. You'd buy it. It was all good. And you could have fun with all of it. Well, listeners, we're just done our time here, but I'll end with just a couple quick comments. Okay, but yeah, either way, during the Golden Age, everything was good. Nothing was bad. Everything was working. During the post 2008 era, every game has been bad. Even the good games have got major flaws. Like Halo 4 was a good game, but it had major flaws. I don't think Call of Duty's made a good game since. Battlefield has not made a good game since. Battlefront is a joke. The Madden NFL games are so bad. NHL games went under, I think, because they were so bad. You name any Final Fantasy games stopped making so many because they were so bad. Star Ocean games stopped making them because they were bad. All these franchises, Gears of War games got bad. All these franchises went under. But anyways, listeners, I'm thinking that that's all for now. I will see you tomorrow on Universe Immersion. And it might be the next day or the next day or the next day after that. But we'll see. We just never know, listeners. Good day and good night and good morning to you all. This has been Gregg